Our next speaker is responsible for delivering a suitable site and a willing community for the GDF, not in Sweden, but here in the Geological Disposable Facility for the UK. She was previously RWM's Waste Management Director, and before that she actually spent 7 years working with SKB, the Swedish waste management company that we've just been hearing about. Please welcome Anne McCall.
Right, thank you very much everybody, and like the previous speaker, I think I've met a lot of you before, but nice to see some new faces as well. In terms of this debate, the big waste debate, I'd like to throw another dimension into the mix, if I may, and that is that whilst I'm totally in with the integrated waste management approach, I do think that the paradigm needs to shift from waste management, just moving waste around, to waste disposal, which is really where I'm coming from. I think the previous speakers have set up nicely and said everything that I would need to say about why do we need a geological disposal facility. We can talk about that in the Q&A, so I won't spend any of my precious time actually looking at why a GDF, why geological disposal, but I'm happy to talk about that. The other thing is, well, why now? Why is it important to this arena, and why is it important to the NDA? I think my pitch would be that a geological disposal facility is mission critical to the NDA. The NDA cannot clean up all of its nuclear sites if it hasn't got a disposal facility to put the waste in. It can manage the waste, and we've been managing waste in the UK for over 50 years, but in terms of disposing of it responsibly, then I think we need a GDF is mission critical to the NDA. It's also mission critical to a lot of other aspects of the industry, as we've heard from Juliet's talk, and the whole aspect of integrated waste management. It's not just the nuclear industry that has radioactive waste, so we need to be responsible with our radioactive waste. And it's about time, I think, is really the issue from my perspective. It's also mission critical to the government. Two reasons for that. The first one is, whether you agree with it or not, new nuclear has actually made it onto the agenda, and if we are going to have new nuclear in the UK, I think it's the only responsible thing to make sure that we do have a disposal route available for any new nuclear build. The other aspect is linked into the points that Juliet made, which is related to the industrial strategy of BAYS, aspects that should be very dear to the hearts of many people in communities, things like skills, aspects of infrastructure, and also the fact that as a nuclear nation, and we were one of the pioneers of the nuclear industry, let's not forget, I think it's only responsible that we're able to show that we can actually deal responsibly with the waste from cradle to grave, as it were. So having established why a GDF and why now, which are the two aspects of it. The why now, I have to say, chimes in with some of the graphs that James showed about the fact that there are peaks arriving, and as the NDA carries on with its mission of cleaning up of the sites, there comes a point where you're building more and more stores and the sites are going to get clogged. And in particular, I think there was mention of the Sellafield site is actually a very small site with an awful lot of radioactive material on it, and potentially will choke itself up at some point. So we need to move this waste, and we need to move it responsibly. So if we need one, and we need one now, what is required to actually deliver a geological disposal facility? And this is radioactive waste management. We actually are now the custodians, shall we say, of the decades of research that has been done, not only in the UK, but also in terms of how we've actually built the links with our sister organisations. Philippe's mentioned a lot of the international, I wouldn't call them overseas, we talked about this last night, they're not overseas, they're overseas to us, but they're not overseas to the people in Europe. But internationally, a lot of people are actually making progress with this. We have very strong links with all of those organisations. We can pull them in, we can get their expertise, and they are doing it now, which means we can get on the back of all of those skills and actually exchange skills and resources. We also, as I say, hold the decades of research that have been done in the UK with the past successes and failures, shall we say, of the nuclear industry, which we've also touched on this afternoon. So we hold all of that, and disposal in the UK requires three things, which is a design and safety case. We've heard that safety is absolutely paramount. I mean, from our perspective, we will need to design such a facility, and we will need to make a safety case for such a facility, and that will be scrutinised by the regulators, safety regulators, environmental regulators, planning regulators, and we will not be allowed to actually develop such a facility unless we can pass all of those tests. So that's the first thing. So we have a strand of work in our repertoire, shall we say, that actually is around the design and safety case development, and that's a key part of our activities. We also need waste packaged in a form that is compatible with a geological disposal facility. There's an awful lot of money being spent by the NDA today, and an awful lot of activity on all the sites that you'll be familiar with, that's actually taking a responsible approach to packaging this waste in a passively safe form. But it has to be compatible with a geological disposal facility. We need to make sure we're not creating a new legacy that we can't deal with and that is actually suitable for going into a GDF that we might build. And the third strand of our work is the most important, as I stand here before you, is finding a site with a willing community. And a suitable site means a suitable site that we can make a safety case for, because as I said, the regulators won't let us move forward unless we can do that. And a willing community, need I say more than the eloquent way that and the slides that Philippe put up about what are the issues. And as Professor Blow has mentioned, it's always been, it's not necessarily a technical issue, it's a social and ethical issue as to the fact that we need to make progress. So they're the three things we need. And very briefly, I'll just touch upon the fact that I mentioned the design and safety case. I won't say any more than that, other than we do actually hold this decades of research that we've got, and we've got these very strong links with our sister organisations. The second one, again, quite close to my heart, waste management. RWM, Radioactive Waste Management Limited, we actually do more than just the geological disposal facility. We have two parts to our mission, which is to deliver a geological disposal facility and provide radioactive waste management solutions for the industry. So we work very closely with James and the rest of the estate, not just the NDA estate, all of the waste producers, including EDF, Horizon, etc. And we look at ways of applying this waste hierarchy that you've heard an awful lot about. We are not making a grab for everything that's possibly termed as radioactive waste to go in a GDF. It's a very precious commodity, and if other things can be done with it, in the same way that LLWR have been extremely successful by opening up other routes, our intention is to open up other routes and actually use similar routes to the routes that the LLWR have used. So, for example, if there's a lot of pond furniture, a lot of metal around, could we decontaminate it to the state where we could actually put it through a different route and reduce the volume? So we have this strand of work which is around applying the waste hierarchy, making best use of existing facilities. This is another one that we work very closely with the sites on, and in particular Sellafield, who are looking at whether or not they can get more throughput through the different plants, whether or not we could actually put different feed routes through the plants, so we don't have to build more plants and we don't have to actually spend more taxpayers' money. So we actually are looking at, we work very closely with the industry. So I think there was one slide earlier that showed that the life cycle of waste management starts at the point of retrieval. So those things like James showed, where they're actually retrieving waste from the Sellafield site, we are involved with those people at the very start of the retrieval campaign, and they talk to us about how they might actually characterise and treat the waste so that we're not spending resources unnecessarily. And the third one is obviously opening up new facilities and new routes as needed, and the GDF comes under that category. We run the disposability assessment process, and that basically means that we work with waste producers and we actually get to the point of looking at their waste so that we make sure it's compatible from its birth, really, from its cradle right the way through its grave. I won't say any more about that. But in terms of our waste management activities, we are actually looking at higher activity waste management, and it's not just disposal. I think that's the message that I want you to get, and that we will only be putting in a GDF what really needs to go into a GDF at the end of the day. And finally, I won't talk too much about finding a site with a suitable community. I think there's probably a lot of questions. I think this slide I put up because there are 3 smiling faces on that photograph there. And this is really from my experience of working with SKB. Can you ever find a willing community with a suitable site? And I think those 3 faces say yes, you can. The chap in the middle is the Mayor of Oskarshamn, and he's the guy who won the facility in their terminology. The other guy is Peter Velund, who was a chap who lost the facility, but they've got the canister factory and a number of other aspects of the whole development, if you like, that was seen in the round. And the chap on the right-hand side is my old boss, Klaus Tjägerström, who was the president of SKB. And this is an example of them working together to actually make sure that everybody got something out of it. Everybody was happy at the end of the day when the decision was made. I can talk to you about the story, but effectively, before they made the decision, they had two sites that they were investigating, and they realised that one of them would be perceived in local political terms as a loser and the other one as a winner. So they actually devised a situation whereby out of the benefit, what they might call the added value package, they call it, but the benefits package, the chap who lost got 75% of the benefits package, and the people who won got the jobs and the remainder. And all of those things were done in terms of some of the lessons where they actually worked very hard with both communities, looking at some of the long-term and intermediate sort of benefits that they could get from the whole added value of the community. So the idea was that the developer was there to actually add value to the community on the basis that ultimately the workers would live in that community, and they didn't want to live in a hostile environment. They would like to be part of the community and actually be good neighbours. So they looked for lots of projects and lots of areas where they could work collaboratively and work together. So there was something in it for the developer and there was something in it for the community. And the whole piece, I use the word added value, but that's really how they framed a lot of their work, was added value. There was an early engagement, and it was all very different. So there is no one size fits all, as I'm sure you will be aware. You have to actually tailor the engagement and the development and the conversations very much specific to the community. Listening, now we've heard a lot about that today, but that is absolutely key to the whole thing. They always used to say you've got one mouth and two ears for a reason. And I think that's really where we get to. And there are different agendas, and we'd have to be flexible and agile in actually being able to accommodate those agendas. And ultimately, the role of the developer, SKB, was under the heading of being a good neighbour and working in partnership to add value to the community. And actually looking, from our perspective, we are looking for that whole aspect to have a conversation, shall we say, about how we are part of the vision of where the community ultimately wants to be. Whether the community would like to see the back of its waste once and for all and never have anything to do with it, in other words, it's leaving the area, or whether or not the waste is staying, but staying in a more a safer manner and being much better. So that's really the way that they did it. And it's often very useful, I think, when we're starting this conversation, as we need to in the UK, to actually start to talk about other people's areas, because it's a bit more safe and it's a bit more neutral than talking about what we might do here. But it opens up what I call a portfolio of possibilities. You know, let's look at what other projects, like our sister organisations, but also other major infrastructure projects in the UK. This whole aspect of added value, I'll call it added value, not benefits or anything else, added value to a community is not an unusual concept, shall we say, when you're talking about major infrastructure which is going into a new community. And I think I'll leave it there, if that's okay.